Tenet is not just a fun movie to watch, it's actually pretty deep. I read the entire movie script for Tenet, and while there wasn't a ton in there that you couldn't get from watching the movie, it's a pretty fast-paced movie with some pretty stunning visuals, so you might have missed things. I'm going to quickly go through 2 details you might have missed that are kind of cool to know and explain the story a little bit better, and then I'm going to go into what I really want to talk about, which is the themes. The first detail happens pretty early on, with the first huge exposition dump to the protagonist. You remember the scene where the lab technician is picking up bullets instead of dropping them. She briefly explains to the protagonist that if you are shot with an inverted bullet, it's more catastrophic than a typical bullet. And for some reason, I still missed this detail after watching the movie 3 times. I guess I had supposed that the reason an inverted bullet would be deadly is because it's moving backwards and it's more catastrophic because of the shape, but that's not actually the case. This part of exposition explains, because everything that's inverted becomes radioactive, you'll actually die of radiation poisoning, something similar to being exposed to nuclear waste. I guess it has something to do with the entropy being reversed on inverted objects. Anyways, this comes up later in the movie because the protagonist insists that they invert at the Oslo Freeport with Kat so she doesn't die of her gunshot wound from an inverted bullet. Now again, just to explain, be super clear, the reason they had to re-invert Kat is so that she would be moving the same direction in time as the bullet, and therefore the bullet wound. The radiation that she was poisoned with therefore wouldn't kill her in the normal few hours. She would be able to recover from the bullet wound as if it were a normal one because her and the bullet are aligned in time. Cool, so the second detail that I thought you might have missed, because I definitely did watching the movie, was that Sador was a CIA operative the entire time. This idea of Sador working both sides of governments is brought up multiple times, but it's really hammered home when he offers to the protagonist this CIA code word, "No friends at dusk." Instead of responding with the correct CIA code word back to confirm his understanding, the protagonist completely ignores this. So part of the reason I think this is cool is because it shows that the protagonist is no longer a CIA operative, and this is important because his mind, his thinking has changed from the beginning of the movie. Just like in his first Tenet briefing, the protagonist is no longer working in the national interest of the United States, he's working in the interests of the entire world. So when Sador offers him the CIA code word, the protagonist refusing at this point, in my opinion, just symbolizes his transition into more of a world soldier, not confined by any individual nation's conflict of interest. Sador uses this conflict of interest to his benefit. Okay, with those out of the way, I really want to talk about the theme of Tenet and what I think Christopher Nolan was trying to say with this movie. Now, you could just say it's a cool movie, he wanted to make something about time travel, but I think it's pretty obvious that it's deeper than that. To lay a foundation for this analysis, I have to compare this movie to The Prestige. That's the first Chris Nolan movie I saw, and I was pretty mind blown. Why? Because he used magic as a metaphor for movie making. Just as the message of that movie was that a magician acts his whole life just to make one cool trick, a movie leads you down one pathway of thinking the entire time just to subvert you at the end. And even more deep than that, some movies never subvert you, but are actually about something never seen on screen. They're about something deeper. And this is what I would call meta-criticism. I deeply believe that Chris Nolan is making a meta-criticism of films, modern films specifically, with the movie Tenet. You have to look a little bit below the surface, but I don't think it's that far-fetched. Hear me out. I think most people would agree a main theme taken away from the movie is that everything you do in this life becomes a message for posterity. This happens with Kat, this happens with Neil. It's explicitly mentioned in the movie that they can't leave any records because Sador will find out about it in the future and then travel back in time to counteract their actions. But there is a lighter side to this, and that is, if you create something, a song, a movie, or any kind of art really, it's never lost. There's always going to be a posterity for it, as long as it's preserved. Any record that we make is created for posterity. I mean, that's the entire plot of Bill and Ted, actually, is that they make such cool music that the entire future revolves around them. Now, I don't want to go too much down this rabbit hole, but I had to bring that up and explain it so I could go into my next point, which is I think Tenet was a message for posterity. and that is, you might not even enjoy the movie while it's happening. You might not even enjoy it on the third watch. For me, I felt like I was just grasping the concepts the third watch, and that's a perfect example of art that isn't appreciated now, but might very well be generations from now, or in the lingo of the movie, for posterity. This movie was generally well received, but the little things that people nitpicked, like it's too complex, the plot is too contrived, these are the things that I think Chris Nolan specifically made the movie in order to combat. He wants movie making and filmmaking to be elevated to a new level. This, in my opinion, is the genius of Chris Nolan, is that he makes enjoyable films for, the layman, but also someone can look really, really deep at the themes and still walk away entertained, thinking about it for weeks, rewatching the movie to try and glean new insights. I think the takeaway from this is just make something you like, make something beautiful, make something that will take generations, posterity, to figure out. Don't make it for today. Today's movies, honestly, they kind of suck. I think this is overblown. There's many YouTube channels that just beat this point into the ground, but it's mostly true. Movies today just aren't as enjoyable for someone that wants to look past the surface. Entertaining, but no real substance. You walk out of the theater not a better person and without a second thought. You never want to re-see these movies, and therefore they have no posterity. But I think the coolest part of this analysis is that Chris Nolan might have made this movie as a meta-criticism of remakes. Now, you can call him a hypocrite because he made the Batman series, which is just a rehash of an existing character, but I disagree. He took such a different angle to Batman, completely reinvented the character, and arguably everything that's happened ever since has been based on his take. And he's not even a comic book guy. He's a career filmmaker who took on a comic book action series and succeeded. If you don't believe me, think back to the plot of the movie. People in the future want to ruin the past because they have no future. Now that is a cold indictment of today's movies. Remakes, rehashes, sequels, reboots, all of these things. I believe Sador is the embodiment of futuristic nihilism, saying, if I can't have anything, neither can you, which ends up being a tagline of the movie at large. Remakes are just a lazy way of making a quick buck, but I think it's more sinister than that, and Chris Nolan was trying to say something about these bitter cancel culture people of today. They look to the past, and they want to destroy the past because they don't enjoy their present. Maybe I'm totally wrong, maybe I'm looking too much into this, but I think it's a pretty perfect narrative if you were trying to make a criticism of today's film market, but also, stay in the good graces of Hollywood and have access to hundreds of millions of dollars to create these amazing, beautiful, spectacle films. Chris Nolan nailed both of those. That about does it for this movie review of Tenet. This is the first one I'm making, so do like the video if you enjoyed this. Is it worth my time? Is it worth my effort? Or should I just stick with the movie readings themselves? Let me know in the comments below, and go watch the full movie script reading. The link is in the description. Until next time, see you in the next movie reading.